Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. So, a little over 5 years ago, right before I took a trip to Guatemala, I think it was actually right before COVID as well, my hair began coming out in clumps. Not just a little more than usual. I tend to be a bit of a shedder, but clumps. And I had just become a single mom and I moved in with my daughter into a new apartment. My periods were really, really heavy at the time. My dad had a stroke around this time as well. So stress was admittedly very high. I was waking at 2 or 3 a.m., essentially living on adrenaline. And I'm definitely an adrenaline junkie, but this was not the good kind. And this was essentially leading up to a phase of what I would label as burnout that ultimately helped me become an expert on the topic. So I'm grateful for this experience for sure, but it wasn't necessarily fun when I was in it. So I was telling myself that I was fine, and yet I was cold all the time. I was getting lightheaded frequently, and I was really, really tired. So when I finally ran a complete iron panel, thanks to my dear friend, you know who you are, who said, let's run some labs on you. There's something going on here. Thank you. I love you. It was clear after these labs were run that I was truly anemic. So I had low ferritin, but also my iron was low. I believe my hemoglobin was also low. I'll have to go back and look at those. That would be a fun exercise to bring those and go through them with you guys. But essentially, my iron storage, my ferritin was very low, just like I talk about all the time with women. And this is the kind of low that doesn't grow hair. So luckily, I felt like I knew what to do. I knew that I had to kind of build from the ground up. So I recognized that I likely wasn't getting enough protein. I certainly wasn't getting enough iron in my diet. I had really cut back on animal protein at that point for a number of different reasons. And I'm not saying that you have to eat animal protein to have good levels of iron. That's not what I'm saying. But for me, I think that was part of what was going on. And I worked on my gut-liver axis. So essentially, I put myself through a self-supervised, which I don't recommend that you do. Please do not do this on your own. Please work with a practitioner if this is something you're interested in doing. But I put myself on a liver gallbladder cleanse. These are, again, not appropriate if you have biliary obstruction or other things going on, so only guided by a clinician. But essentially, I knew exactly what I would do with a patient, and so I did it with myself. I worked on my gut. I really committed to my daily yoga practice. It wasn't a daily practice at that point. It was kind of, when I can squeeze it in between patients and getting my daughter from school. And it took patience, and I would say about 8 to 12 weeks for the shedding to slow down. So I had massive clumps in the back of my head and my hair was breaking and falling out. And so it took a little time for that to slow down and then to see new growth. And today I'm going to share some of the framework of the things that I used, some of the gut support, liver support, minerals, nervous system first protocols. And essentially, I'm hoping that this can help you if hair loss is something that's holding you back. So welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, and I'm excited to share about hair loss today because midlife hair loss is a signal. It's not just a cosmetic nuisance, but it's a sign that we need to work on restoring our terrain health. A healthy terrain is a terrain that grows healthy hair. So from a naturopathic perspective, hair loss in midlife is your body asking us to look a little bit deeper. So, yes, we might investigate hormone fluctuations and nutrient status, stress, and your HPA axis, gut liver health, and build a personalized plan together. But essentially, the process is really simple and we're going to go in order. So, we're going to measure, we're going to correct, we're going to simplify, and we're going to ritualize. So, your nervous system is online, you're in a healing state, and you're correcting any nutrient deficiencies that have led to hair loss to begin with. So, hair loss is one of the main drivers that gets a woman to first make that phone call and come into the office and become a patient. And no, it's not as simple as, oh, just take this supplement. But there are steps that we can take that absolutely can get us to the root cause of that hair loss. And I love guiding patients on this journey. So I hope me sharing my story helped a little bit, but let's normalize this even further. Female pattern hair loss is so common by midlife and it increases with age. So many women are going to notice pattern thinning by age 50. And the emotional toll that this takes on women is very real. I thought this was so interesting. In a Brazilian study of women with hair loss conducted in 2012, the fear of losing all hair was described as great as the fear of a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. So that's how deeply hair ties to our identity, right? If you've ever struggled with hair loss, you know that feeling. It's very jarring. Maybe you've cried in the shower because so much hair is falling out, or you're not washing your hair anymore, which too frequent hair washing is not a great thing either. But of course you have if you maybe clicked on this because you're interested in hair loss, right? You know that feeling then. And it's not vanity, right? It's hair is our identity. We have memory around our hair, different experiences that have been important to us where our hair is involved, getting different hairdos or haircuts. A lot of times we have really special relationships with our hairdressers. I know I do. I've been seeing the same woman since I was 4, which is crazy, but she should be a guest on the podcast. But essentially, hair can be a signal of safety to the nervous system. And so many women feel hair loss and changes in texture, and they experience that loss very deeply. Some of the phrases that I hear from women are, my part is widening so much. I heard the other day, it looks like a Christmas tree down the center. I'm thinner at the temples and crown, but sometimes the front will be okay, or you'll get those little wispy baby hairs. Often I'll hear that it's diffuse overall hair loss. Sometimes it is coming out in clumps or patches. Very often I'll hear, my hair has never looked like this in my life. I had hair like X, Y, and Z before. So if that's you, I see you. And let's talk about the levers that you can control. Okay, so quick hair primer. Hair, it goes through cycles of growth. So you have anagen or growth phase, catagen, transition, and telogen or rest or shedding. So big stressors like illness, chronic infections, crash dieting, not getting enough nutrients, surgery, very high stress, not getting enough sleep. This can push a lot of follicles into telogen all at one time. So that will then cause a heavy shed about 6 to 12 weeks later after that major stressor. And this is called telogen effluvium. So the hair follicles are really metabolically hungry. And we've talked all about things like the cell danger response and nutrient status, right? And how the body's really smart about where it diverts energy. And hair follicles need oxygen. So you need enough iron to deliver oxygen to the hair follicle. You need a healthy thyroid signal, so T3. You need steady glucose, so blood sugar stabilization, which we've talked about before. And you need essentially an anti-inflammatory tone in the environment, so no inflammation ideally. And you need the ability to absorb fat-soluble nutrients. So this is why I won't necessarily just start with a random hair vitamin for patients, but I will start with the terrain because you might not even absorb that vitamin. As you know from previous episodes in my Vital Spirit method, pillar 4, which is rebalanced and resilient, hair, skin, nails, and spirit. This is where essentially the surface, so your hair, skin, and nails, is a summary of what's going on in your inner terrain. So when we've worked on the gut-brain axis, your circadian rhythm, cortisol tone, when we've detoxed and drained, right? We've done things in order. We've worked on hormone clearance. We've repleted minerals. We've found more meaning in life, right? Then this is all reflected on the outside. So spirit is so much more than just hair, skin, and nails, but essentially, this is where we're having those conversations about what further lights us up, what brings us joy. And very often, this is also the phase in which we're noticing changes on the outside in our hair, skin, and nails, which we love, right? We love seeing results like that. And I just love saying that your scalp can't outglow your terrain. So essentially, as you work on your terrain, you do become kind of radiant from the inside out. And this is something I love hearing from patients. They very often say, my friends are saying I'm glowing, and that always makes me feel really good. So I touched on this before, but let's dive a little bit deeper. So why do we need iron for our hair growth? Ferritin, you can think of ferritin as like your hair's pantry, because ferritin is your storage form of iron. It's stored in your liver. And most of the time, the best levels to see, or ideally around this level of ferritin for hair, is going to be between a 70 and 100. Now, that is wildly higher than most women when they first come to see me. So if ferritin is less than a 50 and someone is symptomatic, I'm definitely going to investigate that and consider repleting with the co-nutrients for iron absorption, like vitamin C. With B vitamins, I'm going to address why iron was low in the first place. Was it because of heavy periods, low intake, malabsorption because of low stomach acid, which is really common, dysbiosis? So we investigate all of the further root causes that might have caused the low iron that then caused the hair to fall out, right? And then we're also going to look really in depth at thyroid. So we've had a whole episode on this. You can go back and listen to that, right? And hair is a T3 snob. Hair wants lots of T3. So low T3 on your labs, which can often show up with chronic stress, under eating, poor protein intake, or even inflammation. Even when TSH is fine, that low T3, I'll often see when women's hair is falling out. So again, we're looking at a full thyroid panel, TSH, free T4, that free T3, reverse T3 sometimes, and thyroid nutrients like selenium, iron, maybe consider iodine as well. And then sex hormones, of course, right? So through perimenopause, as estrogen is fluctuating and you're getting lowered progesterone and you have sleep that is wobbling, circadian rhythms that are maybe not the same as they used to be, you might have some blood sugar imbalances going on. All of this is going to impact that hair follicle. So definitely postmenopausally, you're maybe seeing that FSH and LH going up. That's expected. And I wouldn't say that adding more estrogen in is a guaranteed fix to this situation, but some patients might experience that their hair is much better when they are supporting with some form of estrogen. Now, as estrogen is fluctuating, as progesterone is going down, it is expected that we're going to see changes in our hair, right? But that doesn't mean that you should see giant clumps falling out or drastic changes in texture. I definitely advise you to dig a little bit deeper into your labs if that's what you're experiencing. And also there are shifts in androgens and DHEA and testosterone and 5-alpha reductase. So the bottom line for me usually is that I want to make sure that the body is clearing hormones. And I really first will investigate things like bile production, bowel movements, and then consider advising around hormone therapy if the terrain is ready. We just had a whole episode on this. So as estrogen and progesterone are drifting down through midlife, so through perimenopause, we do lose some of those follicle protective effects. So essentially the growth phase can shorten, and then you might notice that your strands are getting a little finer. I've definitely noticed that. With less estrogen around, you might also see more of an influence from androgens. So if you tend to be someone that has higher androgen levels, and in some women, DHT can miniaturize follicles. So there will be this female pattern hair loss in that situation. So your thyroid is also going to influence these fluctuations. So again, I'm going to start with the basics and nutrition is going to be foundational here. So looking into that low ferritin, especially with heavier periods, is going to be the first thing we do. And that doesn't always mean that correcting ferritin will correct the hair loss, but very commonly this is the case, and this can take time. So we're also going to evaluate things like your zinc status. We're going to potentially supplement maybe with biotin or B vitamins that are essentially going to help with manufacturing red blood cells. We're going to talk about getting enough protein and omega fatty acids into the diet. So there's a lot that goes into working around the root cause of hair loss. And one of the things that I really want you guys to embrace as you listen is that it isn't an overnight fix, but along the way, you can learn a lot about how your body responds to getting some of these levels optimized. I'll have patients say they feel like a different woman once they've optimized ferritin, for example. So then the bonus is just that your hair stops falling out and looks a lot better. And so keep in mind that throughout all of this optimization of diet and lifestyle, the first thing that we probably are going to want to address is stress, because cortisol spikes, sleep loss, a dysregulated HPA axis and circadian rhythm, they are hugely foundational to the root cause of those telogen hair loss moments that a lot of you have probably experienced if you're listening today. So stress also downshifts your stomach acid production. So now you're not absorbing your iron as well. It's absolutely all connected. Elevated cortisol is going to impact your microbiome. So you really can't address hair loss, ferritin, thyroid, any of the root causes of hair loss without looking at the body as a whole and addressing stress and the gut-brain axis. And that brings me to the gut-liver-bile axis. I wish we could have better names for these. That sounds so boring, but here we are. So that's really the heart of this terrain model, because bile is how you absorb the fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K, and all your essential fats, essentially. So all of those fats and vitamins are key for your hair to be shiny, strong, for your scalp to be healthy. So, of course, you need enough bile to absorb these nutrients. You need to be breaking down your fats to absorb your fat-soluble vitamins. And for example, if beta-glucuronidase is elevated, which we talk about almost every episode, and you're constipated, then you're not clearing estrogens and histamine essentially. And so you're going to have more inflammation in the body, and potentially you're going to have elevated dysbiotic bacteria. Again, another layer of inflammation in the body. And all of that is going to disrupt the hair cycle further. Your body's going to interpret that as stress. So foundationally, we're going to talk about adding things like bitter foods before your meals, arugula, dandelion, ginger, getting beets into the diet. You know, I love my fresh ginger and lemon water. Consider consuming healthy prebiotic fibers, maybe add some ground flaxseed or chia. Maybe consider those castor oil packs we're always talking about to support lymph and bile flow. See, everything we talk about in the Seeds of Health is typically geared toward optimizing this gut-liver clearance, right? Non-negotiable bowel movements, essentially, if we're looking to optimize our hair and work on hair loss, we really want to make sure we're clearing out and detoxing every day. So I would say if you were going to consider some sort of flush like I did or cleanse like I did, you already have all of these down. These are kind of daily rituals. They're part of your routine, and you're already focused on lymphatic support and detox every single day. So this was really pivotal in my own journey in recovery. But again, I would do that supervised with a physician. And for me, I think a really big issue were glucose swings. So I'm very blood sugar sensitive. I don't love when patients say, oh, it's genetic, diabetes runs in my family. So I was about to say diabetes runs in my family, which is true, but it is so much more than that, right? We have choice around our diet and our lifestyle, but I am sensitive to blood sugar swings. And so this was something I got really clear around. And When blood sugar and cortisol are dropping and spiking, and you have these blood sugar swings and these cortisol swings, essentially you're telling your body you are not safe. And so it is not the ideal environment for hair to grow. So you can certainly ground your day and your first meal having a decent amount of protein, whether that's plant-based or animal-based. You certainly want to avoid blood sugar spikes by you want to not consume a ton of sugar. If you are going to have something sugary or a carbohydrate, pair it with a protein and a fat. Ideally have fiber before a sugar. So all of these little tweaks and adjustments sound really minor, but they have a cumulative effect. Sprinkling little vagal tone resets throughout the day to calm that cortisol, and moving your body after you eat. All of these are really wonderful strategies around keeping blood sugar stable, and inevitably that will help with hair. So I already went through some of the more in-depth iron panels that I'll run and the thyroid panel I'll run. Just a reminder that I might also have looked in depth into someone's HPA axis response. I might have looked at DHEA, some sex hormone panels. So let's say that we've run labs and everything looks fine. I'm probably still going to go a step further and look at their gut health. So typically, if I'm finding, for example, that someone has a deficiency in fat-soluble vitamins, like say vitamin A, I'm typically going to find that they do also have issues with bile production. So I might already be kind of knowledgeable about that, but I really love running a stool panel and being able to also see, do we actually have gut inflammation that we can track over time with some of those other labs? So we're not just giving a supplement, we're really using labs to guide dosage, to guide even if a supplement is necessary. Can we achieve these results just with food and diet and lifestyle, which is typically my goal. It's usually the goal of a lot of my patients. So we might use labs to track essentially whether further intervention is necessary, and definitely to track some of those labs that are really root causes of hair loss that I've already mentioned. Now, I want to also just mention something called alopecia areata. So this is an autoimmune form of hair loss. So these will typically be more well-defined hair loss patterns. And oftentimes, their patients will see a smooth patch, or it might also come along with other systemic symptoms like nail pitting or ridging. They typically will have a family history of autoimmune disease. So these are some of the things to consider and look out for if you feel like your hair loss is a little bit different than what I've been explaining. And there often is, so say hair loss is more autoimmune in nature, I'm still going to come back to the gut. I'm going to come back to root causes of the autoimmune process, right? And I'm going to, again, investigate gut health, inflammation, any viral contribution, stress levels. So that might coexist with telogen effluvium or female pattern thinning. So I do think it's important to rule that out and just to mention that. Now, I'm typically screening for autoimmunity in patients because we focus on prevention and optimal health, but I definitely would recommend at least then running a thyroid antibody panel, potentially other autoimmune antibody panels, looking into celiac disease as a root cause in that case. So there might be some more detailed root causes that we investigate when we do think that hair loss is autoimmune in nature. But essentially, whatever the root cause of your hair loss is, which hopefully now you have an idea of how to figure that out a little bit, we're going to start with gut repair and bile flow. So we want to always recognize and remove sources of inflammation in the gut. And certainly when we're considering what might potentially be a nutrient-based hair loss, we're really going to want to focus on absorption of that nutrient, right, where it starts, which is in the gut. And we're going to want to make sure that we do get enough protein and iron repletion at flow. I've been referring some patients even further for iron infusions. I think that's really case-by-case basis. So speak with your clinician about it or reach out to me if you have more questions. Consider mineral supplementation and some of the cofactors for these minerals. So again, you might want to track things like vitamin D and test and see, Do I need more? Should I be getting out in the sun? Typically, that's my solution. I much prefer to use nature for things like vitamin D. And you can consider topicals. I love using things like castor oil on my hair. I think that's some patients say that they feel like it doesn't work for them. Other patients absolutely love it. Sometimes I'll dilute some rosemary essential oil and I'll do that with the castor oil or with some Ayurvedic oils, and absolutely focus on stress reduction no matter what the root cause, because again, that HPA axis is so important to getting our body into a healing state, getting into the parasympathetic rest and digest, all of that. Because also, if we're not getting into that parasympathetic rest and digest, we do tend to not produce enough stomach acid. And things like midlife stress or chronic H. pylori infection or long-term PPI use or eating on the run, eating on the go can essentially leave you with lower stomach acid. And some signs that this might be going on with you would be bloating after you eat protein or feeling really easily full, having reflux that gets better with bitters or stomach acid support, having undigested food in your stool, and you need stomach acid to essentially absorb iron from your food. And you need something called intrinsic factor to absorb your B12. And for all of these reasons, hair loss might be a sign that you are low in stomach acid. So this is something that you will see on a stool test. Sometimes there's different ways to interpret that. You might, for example, see higher fat or protein on your stool test and might be a sign that you're low in stomach acid, or again, you might have some of those symptoms. So once we know we're breaking down and absorbing our food well, you might consider, yes, some vitamin D supplementation or B12 and folate. You can, again, test for those. You might consider selenium or thyroid support, essential fatty acids, your omegas, right? And potentially biotin. Women always ask me about biotin or silica, right? So yes, you might use some of these nutrients, you might use supportive agents, but I really highly recommend you start with the terrain first, because it is very much hit or miss. And often when you notice an improvement from taking something, it's because that thing was low. And so again, that's why I will guide it with lab testing. Women also always ask about collagen. I do like using collagen personally. I also recommend bone broth. If you're a meat eater, then you can do bone broth, and that's going to add glycine and proline, which is really great for your keratin. So getting enough protein, I know we say it all the time, but again, that doesn't just mean animal protein, but if you're an egg eater, that might mean eggs. For me, I love tofu. That might mean legumes, nuts, seeds, leafy greens, right? And considering a collagen support or supplement. I really, really love using cell salts, especially while we're waiting to get labs back. So maybe we're going to find in labs that you are low in red blood cell magnesium. Maybe not, but regardless, it's wonderful to me to start with a homeopathic or a cell salt. So calc fluor is one of my favorite cell salts if you have really brittle ends, which I do. I need a haircut very badly. Or calc phos for rebuilding hair when you've experienced a lot of stress. I'll use silica a lot. So cell salts and homeopathy, certainly you want to use guided with your physician if you can. And if it's something you want to explore on your own, there's lots of resources out there. I have a handout on these as well. Now, if DHT is a root cause of your hair loss, which we didn't get super deep into, but you might consider using herbal saw palmetto or pumpkin seed oil, and this can support something called 5-alpha reductase. So this is, again, something that I would guide patients around and is a little bit more in depth than I'm going to go in this episode. I would absolutely recommend some sort of topical nightly scalp massage. You really want to get the circulation going to your hair follicles. Maybe considering a green tea or a holy basil tea every single day, and certainly a nettle infusion tea or some sort of supportive, iron supportive nutrient tea. So again, nettle's a great source of iron and one of my favorites to add into any hair treatment plan. If stress is high, I might use ashwagandha or other adaptogens to support the HPA axis. And as always, I'm really looking to reduce inflammation. So I might even use something like curcumin or even just adding turmeric root to the diet. When women ask about hair products, I think for this episode, I'm just going to say typically my recommendation is that less is more. A lot of times when I'm working with a new patient, we're really cleaning out some of the more chemical based products. Again, I think that maybe is a whole episode on its own. And I do want to say that I just want to honor and name the spiritual, energetic, cultural meanings of hair that I might not have pointed out or discussed today. Across many cultures, hair can speak to identity, our vitality, belonging, sacredness, and there's rituals around hair depending on your culture. So the meaning of hair can really vary. And so I do want to be sensitive and respectful around that diversity. I was really focused on hair loss in midlife, why it might be happening, and what you can do about it. So I do get that hair shedding really can feel like losing part of who you are. It really can feel like losing your vitality. And the grief around that is valid. And for some women, I am really counseling them around what they can expect as far as changes go. But more often than not, there can be so much improvement when we do improve some of the things we talked about today. So I think that it's also nice to have a little ritual around your hair. So you might want to have a nightly ritual, maybe where you do a nice massage with some of those oils I mentioned. And maybe if your hair is long enough, maybe braid it. If not, just give some stimulation rub to the hair follicles and some intention. Maybe hold your hands over your head and just give some focus. And you can even just say to your body, say to yourself, I am safe, I'm nourished, I'm growing. And you can repeat that, I am safe, I'm nourished, I'm growing, and just connecting with your mind body and just giving your whole system the message like, I'm ready to grow, I'm here for this. So again, I think expectations are really important around this topic. I almost didn't want to do a hair loss episode because it is something that women come in asking about and wanting to see change around. And sometimes it does take time. But also, I know if it's taking an excessive amount of time, and I know if certain labs have changed or not changed, it's a really good guidepost for where we're missing something or where we need to focus our energy. So if it's tillage and effluvium, shedding does often slow in 8 to 12 weeks. That was my experience as well. But it often can take 6 months, sometimes a year to see really big shifts. I feel like it was 5 years ago and I finally just feel like my hair is back to normal. That's probably why I haven't cut it, if I'm honest. So I hope this has been helpful for you. And I hope you share it with a friend who's said, my hair is falling out, I don't know what to do. And I hope that you can follow along, maybe leave a review if you feel so inclined, because that's how we'll grow. And I hope that you have a great day. So as always, you can download my free lab interpretation guide, and you can go to my Rupa lab shop if you wanted to get started on some of these on your own. So please send this to a friend who says, my labs are normal, but my hair keeps falling out, and make sure that she's looked in depth into some of the root causes of her hair loss. And I hope you come back next week.